with the Americans. So he has been moving to Mabu in Nova Scotia, and he was photographing there. And these are the kind of photographs that he has been doing there. So this is very different from what he did in the Americans. This is much slower. This is much more oriented towards the landscape. A lot of people do not know that, but he just continued photographing even after the Americans, although we are very used to only knowing his work from the Americans. But this is the kind of stuff he did when JUNGJIN Lee worked with him. So it's a very different approach, and you see here that he has already moved on from his approaches that he used in the Americans. He also painted a lot on his pictures there. So this is the other influence here. And of course, he did. His later work was published by Steidl afterwards, so he never stopped. He never stopped working until the end. So looking at these influences, Eugenia Perry said on one of the works by JUNGJIN Lee, her work is about viewing ordinary things, love, change, tolerate absolute incomprehensibility, contemplate the temporal, recognize the celestial. So these are the concepts of there. And she's been very active. She has a whole lot of publications. We will only look at 3 of them today. And with that, let's jump into the book here. The first book I will be talking about is Echo. Echo is a museum catalog. I tried to find out how her works, how her publications come into life. From what I gathered, a lot of these publications come out of museum exhibitions. Her work, as I said, it is very manual. I think Sheila and Anya, you have both been in the museum and have seen the actual prints, so they are huge if you look at them. And she's very interested in this material aspect of that. So the books always come out of these exhibitions, and Echo is a summary of a lot of these work that she has been doing, and it brings a retrospective exhibition together. These are the works that you see here. It starts with On Road, which is, again, a nod to Robert Frank. It's not On the Road like the Kerouac Introduction to the Americans, but it's On Road, which is both a nod to Robert Frank, but also a voice that comes into and starts coming into her own. She has been working in the American desert. She has been dealing with her heritage, with this Pagodas project. She's been doing these wabi-sabi things, dealing with things, but also with things like the wind. And if you look at her work, here, this is the earliest work that she did. This is On Road. So these are random encounters that she did, random things that she's seen. And she always continues with this very material side of the composition and of the image. Here, this is one picture that I did not understand when I saw this the first time, but you will understand it when you have been to a monastery in Korea. These are views from outside, from inside the monastery to the outside. At least it was my interpretation. Not a great fan, just to have some critique here, I'm not a great fan of this here because I really never really know where goes what. So this is now too. This is American Desert, I guess. So here you see the first, the very few instances where she has fragments of humans in there, and she contrasts humans with the landscape. But again, here you always, you again see this idea that she combines the materiality of the print together. And she has this flow that she has in these images here. So this is 3. This is again American Desert. The things she photographs are very ordinary. It's rocks, it's desert. But let me go very close here to make sure that you see that. In these pictures, you see her process. Her process is applying the emulsion onto this paper here, where you see the edges of the paper here. So part of this is, so this image is a mix of her being in the field, being in the American desert and taking a photo, but then taking the negative home and working with the negative and applying her own work of her hand and connecting in the darkroom with this picture again. So, and all of these faults, these imperfections, this again is where the wabi-sabi comes in, the imperfection that you see here, like this things that are, I have to stay close here, otherwise you think it's a fault here. So here you see faults in the negative, and these faults that you see here on top of you, this is not a perfect image, but these imperfections become part of her work here. And so the work of her hand is always present in how she constructs these images here, these negatives. Let me jump to this one. So again, I have to look it up because here the title is always missing. This is 7. This is actually where wind starts. So this is a different approach to the idea of making the work that she does in the darkroom, the work with the actual print, to bring this, to make this part of the picture. So here she exposes the whole paper, but she only paints the emulsion onto a part of the paper. So you see here these torn out, this is painted on edges. And this is an interesting choice to paint it like to make the book like this in this kind of fold out that it produces a way you can hang it in, on the wall in an exhibition. Okay, so this is wind. So here again you have the idea that what you are talking about is something that you cannot see. It is the wind, but you do not see the actual wind. You only see what the wind does, moving the clouds or not moving these tents. The temporality is also important here. So here, this is a very interesting picture to see that you see the wind working on these trees for a long, long time, because these trees grow into this direction because the wind blows them in this direction. So this is a picture about, I don't know how old these trees are, but about a couple of 50 or 60 years of wind developed in this picture here. Again, a different take on the idea of wind. Here you have an absence of wind with these clouds that have not yet been moved here. But again, here this darkness and light, figure and ground, and how everything shifts from one to another is reappearing. It has some very nice essays here in the middle that explain a little bit about her background, about her process. And let's come to the idea of things. So things are important because they age and they accumulate the touch of the human hand here. So here, this is a reference to her, to the heritage, to her heritage, and to the idea that things that accumulate wear and tear are important. And her way of printing is very interesting because she also loses a lot of information here. So you cannot decipher a lot of stuff here. So it's pure form, it's pure black and white, it's pure figure and ground. So there's not a lot of texture. And here this becomes even more pronounced. So this, the way she photographed it from the actual thing, there's only a fragment that remains. It's only a very tiny part. And this part here, this left part, this gap, this pause here, suddenly becomes a very important part of this picture. So again here, you see her roots of calligraphy all over the place here. So this is the smudges of the brush with which she applied the emulsion. So this is echoes, which I find interesting because it shows the it starts with showing the many topics she covers here. And let's come to the second book. This is Unnamed Road, and Unnamed Road. This is the reason why I put this picture by Luc de la Haye in here. So this is a commissioned work that she did in the West Bank and Israel. So she was invited together with 12 other photographers to come to Israel and to come to the West Bank to photograph there. And let's start at the end here. Let me read you the end word here. Making pictures in Israel and Palestine was above all an emotional challenge. My photographs usually deal with something eternal in the landscape, but in this place, the layers of history and conflict, fear and hostility frustrated my camera. I happen to travel a lot in the West Bank, not for any political purpose, but because I like the landscape between the cities. I try to gaze at the land without prejudice or judgment. I didn't want to deal with the masks of the people, and I didn't want to put on my own mask. I wanted to see it as the olive tree sees. But I felt overwhelmed by the realities around me. I felt sad and uncomfortable much of the time, and I found myself trying to make photographs in a place I didn't want to be. It was difficult, but looking back, I can see that it forced me to change as an artist, and I'm grateful for that. On my final trip, I was able to see not only the land, but my own mind with its uneven terrain and movements, and to touch something elemental. So from now, with the ongoing conflict in Gaza, we now know, we are acutely aware of how troubled the land is that she visited there. And I wanted to talk about this book because I found it amazing that she almost failed to make photographs there, that she was so touched by this place that her practice started to be in jeopardy here. And still she managed to make these pictures that suspend any judgment, that just look, as she said, look like an olive tree. An olive tree does not judge the things that it sees. It just looks at things. And she made these kinds of very quiet, very silent photograph where all conflict is just hinted at, but you don't see it because you don't see people there. You don't see people fighting. You don't see people taking a position there. And she also doesn't take a position in this conflict. She just looks at it. And she looks at the same things that she looked in the American desert, which is a less loaded place, a place where that is quieter of these conflicts. In the West Bank and in Israel, these conflicts are much more acute, much more aware. You will be much more aware when you visit it. So even if these pictures do not directly show it, they have all this quality of hinting at it. So eventually she makes some more direct pictures like this, because this is just what is there. This barbed wire, it's just present everywhere. And this is the olive tree that she's talking about. There are some of these very direct images here, but again, she takes herself, she takes a step back. She doesn't judge, she just looks at things. Here in this picture, this idea of things that are destroyed and are worn down takes on a different meaning. So this is why I find this afterwards so compelling to see that she is drawn to these kinds of things, but there is a different meaning to this. So this is a ruin of a house. So, and in this part of the world where she photographed, this takes on a different meaning than just time taking its toll here. And she makes these kinds of pictures that show you how you cannot, how unsolvable sometimes these situations are. With this road that just doesn't go anywhere. It just ends in the middle of nowhere. And here the barbed wire reappears. So this is an interesting book because although she is not a conflict photographer, there is no way that she can avoid this conflict. And she finds a very quiet, still way of talking about this conflict. And even when people eventually appear here, this is one of the picture that are so quiet and so distant that it is almost heartbreaking to look at this kid that is just sitting there and playing in the desert. But this is the way she puts people into her photographs, by using them as flat objects in her composition here. This is what is meant by her temporality. So a lot of her pictures are about different time frames. The tree that gets bent over time with the wind, the people that have lived here and have died here and have become part of the country. All of her pictures are about time and how it passes through this land. So this is, although it is a book that has not been, it is not a current book. This is from I think from 2012 when she did the pictures. It has become an eerie. It has amassed an eerie actuality right now. And let's end on this here. And I will not show you a lot of pictures in here. I will just show you the different sizes here. So these are different books, different sizes. This has a lot of text. It has an essay. This just has an introductory text here that talks about the setup of the project and her feelings towards Gaza and towards the West Bank and Israel, and her photographing there. And this book doesn't have any text at all. It just says voice. It just sums up the work that she's been doing over the years. And here we come, the idea of painting with shadows comes to full circle, because here she just quite literally just paints with shadows. It's nothing else but a shadow here. And this is really a beautiful book with a beautiful binding here. And it's wonderful because it's big. And I'm really jealous on Sheila and Anya that you have been to the exhibition and seen them with their enormous size. But here you get a glimpse on how this feels when you have this in your hand and you see the sheer size of these prints. These photos, if you just take them one by another, so this is the oldest work and this is the newest work, you can see some kind of progress. And the progress, interestingly, comes with a loss of information. So she needs, from the first book, which starts with a very clear picture in the beginning, she now just needs a few distributions of shadow and light, and not even a lot of light here to make a picture. So her way of photography has reduced even more. This is, just to have some critique here, this is in parts very beautifully printed, like this one. So this is a very dark black, and you actually see the texture of the paper that she put the emulsion on, so you can actually zoom in here and get a feel for the original paper. So this is, in terms, very beautifully printed, but there are some pictures in here where her way of photography just seems to break down. And where things are, let me just quickly show you what I mean with that. Where her way of photography and the way it is printed here just starts to break down. It gets really over sharp sometimes. So a lot of these pictures are very beautiful. Some pictures just look like they have been, they do not really tolerate this kind of printing very good. So she continues her theme of encounters with landscape, of seeing without judgment. And she continues the theme of the pause. So interestingly enough, I find there are these pictures, there are these gaps in here where you just have black pages. There's nothing on here. And I find this very beautiful because it gives you a pause. It doesn't really come out here, but it's really just pitch black. So there's nothing on these pictures. And this gives you a moment to pause. And then she goes from this gap. It works like a palette cleanser. So this is one theme, a palette cleanser. And then she starts with another theme. And this looks like there is nothing on there's only crisscrossing on the page. But if you go very close, you can see the brushwork here. And again, this is a very interesting take on this idea of figure ground, because you cannot, the further you go away from these pictures, the further the idea of what is the figure and what is the ground here, the further it gets distorted. And she works with this in the sequencing by introducing more and more structure here. But again, this idea of no judgment, this expands to her composition. She doesn't have a judgment on where is the center of the image. It's a very even image. So if you look at that here, there is no center here for the composition. It's just an even crisscrossing of brushwork. And this just goes on in her composition. And this is one of the pictures where I said, okay, I think her way of photography and the way it is printed is starting to break down. So this, to me, looks a little bit over-sharpened. But again, yeah, very simple photography, very simple shapes, and yet very powerful. And you see what is happening here, that she's using photography like a language to say a word and to use this compositional word in different, to talk about different things, about round things here and about triangle things. And then she goes on to something like this, which is just, where you see that the image itself doesn't have any markings on the negative itself. So this is just the texture of the paper that she prints on. So she uses her photography not only to talk about nature, but to talk about her own processing. And let me just quickly jump to this, because this is one of the pictures where I think, what a bold move to put, to leave the center of your image completely void. So there's nothing here. So this is just about this pause here in the middle, this void here that you see here. And this is, for me, this is the core of what is meant with this with this idea that the pause between two notes here is just as important as the notes themselves. Sometimes she's doing a little bit more variation. This is one of the pictures where we actually see some animal life, or at least remains of animal life, which gives the whole picture a little bit more rhythm here. But you again see this idea of the road, this traversing of nature, and eventually you come to pictures like this that are just shadow painting. So for her, I think we should not talk about photography, but we should actually talk about skiography, because her shadows are almost more important than her light is. She puts in here some of the pictures that she did in the American desert, but this is a different take if you compare it to her first images, where she is always, you always see something in the desert. You always see pictures like this where you see the texture of the cactus. Now she's bolder, so now she is very expressive in just saying, okay, here's a shadow and there is nothing else. And I flipped through this very fast here, but this just makes you want to flip very, very slow and go through this very slow, because you become very quiet when you do that. And this is one of my favorite pictures here, because it's so incredibly simple. And let me end on this, because this is all I have for you today.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Very beautiful. I have a technical question regarding the last book you showed, because I have never touched this book myself. What's the paper like? Because her work, when you see it when you see original works in a gallery or museum, the paper is so extremely beautiful. And I find it must be very challenging to reproduce these images in a printed book.
It is a glossy paper. It is coated. It is very glossy, and I think you need the glossiness because she has these very dark pictures. And if you paint this on a matte, uncoated picture, you will be able to do this here, where there is no texture in here whatsoever. But you will not be able to actually see this. This will probably just be pitch black. I think a little bit gets lost here. A little bit of this feeling gets lost because it's very shiny, glossy, even. And I already mentioned that there are some pictures in here where this, like this one here, where this seems to, this method of printing and this method of dealing with a negative starting to break down. So this is not really, this is not really beautifully printed. I think for me, it's overly sharp and it loses a lot of texture. So you do not see a lot of texture of the underlying paper in here. So it just is very, looks a little bit over sharp. So it's a challenge. I think it's a challenging process to put her actual prints into a book.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think they did a good job here. I think some of them, I think this is printed. Here it is an uncoated paper. So this is just to give you a comparison here. This is an uncoated paper, but here it works better because she is in this, which is her most, yeah, you can almost say journalistic work. Here she is more the pictures are brighter, so they are not as reduced as the pictures in Voice. So it is, you do not lose so much when you paint that on an uncoated paper here. But it's a challenge.
Yeah. All right, Glenn.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand. Hi, Stefan.
Hi, Glenn.
It seems as if she's working so hard with surface and she adds this emulsion and she pays great attention to the surface and the texture of the images. And then the last few you showed us, I understand it's a challenge, but it looks as if she's using the focus in a different way. They're very focused and it's glossy, and it's almost like the message there is not so much about wear and tear and emulsion, but using the subject almost in like calligraphy. It becomes its own texture. I don't know if I'm making sense, but initially it was this wear and tear, the wabi-sabi idea, but the last few, as you're right, they're very, very different, high contrast, but very sharp.
Well,
What is holding it together? Is it her love of surface?
I think in these, it's the composition. So she is extremely reduced here. And I think in this reduction, you do not necessarily need this texture anymore, because she's throwing away almost every information in the picture. Like if you look at this, it would be nice to have some structure here, but even if you look at the actual print, I would suspect that there is nothing here. It's just black. So there is no structure left. So she's reducing herself compositionally much more in this work than she did in previous works. So if you look at this, she started out like this. So which is very close to an actual picture here, with defined with things you can define with defined outlines, almost no discernible texture here. It's a very clear picture here. And here, this is super reduced. And I think this emulsion phase in the middle, I think this is much more important for this work. This work. This is much more important for this work than it is for the later work. Look at the cactus pictures here. Yeah, here for this one, where this is all about the idea that you see her hand, you see the work of her hand. So it's a very abstract expressionism way of making a photo, where you actually see the emulsion and her hand applying the emulsion to it. Whereas here, a lot of this is gone. A lot of this is pure composition. Which is, yeah, when you look at this, this is almost, it's almost she's returning to a point of zero image. There's not a lot of image here left. It's just a smudge of light in the.
Any other question?